want to welcome you to this version of Time to Man Up / Table Talk. We are excited about the opportunity today as we are going to be speaking to Les Wilson. He's going to be our guest on this segment of Table Talk. It is always a great opportunity to talk to individuals and just find out about their background. And so, Les, thank you very much for joining us today. I can't wait to hear your story.
Well, thank you for having me, Sean.
Well, we are going to explore into his experiences as a basketball coach. Growing up, I would always tell people I was a center in a guard's body. You just have those guys that I always loved to bang under the board, but I did not have the body for it. I think I graduated college maybe 155 pounds at 5'10". But man, I love to go position under there and just deal with the big boys. Now, did you play basketball growing up then?
Yeah, I played in grade school and high school, and that was as far as I went. But just got hooked on the sport and got into coaching at an early age, and just 37 years in basketball and loved every minute of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we're going to be just kind of going through and seeing the path that Les took. I don't even know many of his stories, but I have heard he has some amazing stories. So now I've put him out there. He's got to step up now, right? He's got to step up his game. But we're going to put a full court press on him, okay? We won't use too many of those basketball terms, but we're going to put a full court press on him because we want to just hear how he got from point A to point B to then you step away from the game. That's a big moment when you step away from the game too. So we're going to be looking at that and working our way through there. And so I think it's probably best for us to start just so that those that watch this, listen to it, that they can understand. I mean, you can see if you're on Spotify or YouTube, you can see all of the stuff in his office because that's the cool thing is today we are mobile. It's not our normal podcast room, our studio. We have stepped outside and we're actually in Les's office where he has a lot of memories. And for me, it's just basketballs and things like that. But each one of these items tells a story that is significant to Les as a coach, as an individual. And we're going to hear about that. So Les, why don't we just start kind of just talking about your upbringing and how you got from being born to now you're coaching and you're involved in that. Kind of talk to us through that.
Okay, first I have to preface everything by saying I've been truly blessed. I've been blessed with a great family, a wife that's very, very supportive in the coaching field and followed me. And I have been around a lot of good coaches and especially players and just people that supported me, the support staffs. They've just been a blessing to me in my career. I guess I really got hooked on sports as a youngster, maybe 8 or 9 years old, as a bat boy for my cousin, Uncle Rick, and he was a really good athlete in Fairfield, Illinois, and he was an all-state football player and a really good pitcher and was scouted by several major league baseball clubs. But I just wanted to follow him and try to do the best I could do and to be the best I could be in any sport that I really chose. But from there, I just, the regular road, high school or junior high and high school basketball and football. And went to a junior college for 2 years at Alney Central College. Didn't play any sports, but I got my education after transferring to Eastern Illinois University and had a bachelor's degree there and looked for my first coaching. I wanted to be a coach, my first coaching situation. And I had a high school coach by the name of Pete Love. And my mom and dad divorced when I was 13, and my dad left when I was 13. So I didn't have a male figure in my life, but Pete Love was an assistant basketball coach and PE teacher, and I learned, like my sophomore year in high school, that I wanted to be like Pete Love.
Wow.
And he was a great mentor to me and always said, achieving is believing, Les. And he pushed me in basketball practices, and I was like the sixth man, but I pushed the varsity point guard every day in practice, and I just I just developed a good work ethic, and I thank him for that today. But that was one of my mentors and role models as I was growing up and getting through high school, and just such a blessing to me. But I went on to graduate, and I got my first coaching job and a small parochial school. I think I put out like 126 letters after my graduation, and it was 2 days before school starts in Illinois. And I get this call from this parochial school, and they said, "Would you come down and interview? We start school in a couple of days." And I didn't have a job, and I said, "Sure." So I went down and interviewed for it and got the job, and 2 days later started my career. But it was PE, health, world history. Head baseball coach, head basketball coach, athletic director for $7,000 a year.
Oh my goodness.
That was in 1973.
Wow.
So I thought I'll take it for the experience, and that's what I did. And they actually came to us in March that year, and we were going to close the school unless they got proper donations and funding, which they didn't. So I went on back to Fairfield, and my bride, was married there in Fairfield, and I worked at odds and ends job. And one day out of the blue, I got a call from Farmington East High School in Northern Illinois, and they'd saved my application from a year before.
Oh, wow.
So I felt like God was knocking on the door, and they said, "You know what? If you get your minor in driver's education, you can have this job." And so I quit my job and went to school, back to school, one class, drove back and forth to school, and got my driver ed minor. And my wife and I moved to Farmington, Illinois. And that was my first really big job as assistant basketball, and had a mentor there, Bill Wilson, who was, twice my age, but he was just like, a father figure to me and helped me down the ropes, to learn the ropes, and down the road of coaching. And so my wife and I started our lives there, and our kids were born there.
Okay.
and enjoyed the time there. And after that, I went to a school about 30 miles from Farmington called Dunlap, and it was just a great situation, a new school with a tartan track and a swimming pool, and the facilities were just great to sit in the backyard of Caterpillar and had all kind of money. And I was assistant basketball coach there under a friend that was just really good to me, and also coached football, and we were very, very successful. And lo and behold, the basketball coach decided he was going to come to Florida. So he left and came down here and coached down here, and he said, "Why don't you put in your application down here?" And I said, "Okay," so I mailed in an application to superintendent schools of Marion County. And there was a job open at Dunellen High School. And they called me and they said, "Could you come down and interview for this job?" And I said, "Well, you know what? We're coming down on vacation next week." And they said, "Perfect." So I came down, and Dunellen was brand new, beautiful school, all types of facilities, and I thought was a great situation. And they offered me the job right there. So went over to Daytona Beach and laid on the beach, and my wife and I talked about it and decided to make the move. So we uprooted our family from Farmington, Illinois, and came down to Dunellen. And unfortunately, things just didn't pan out and work out the way I wanted it to.
And that's a big change.
That's a big change.
I mean, you're giving up everything and moving to an entire different place.
Exactly.
Not knowing if it's going to work or not.
Right.
Which means you have to have a very supportive wife in that transition.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yes.
And so things didn't go super well down here. What was next then?
Well, then I got on a bus and came back to Illinois, and I interviewed for about 3 jobs, and one of the jobs that I really wanted was my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to come back to my hometown and coach.
Yep.
And I got real close. I was a finalist, and I didn't get the votes, so I didn't get hired. I interviewed at a little school called Oblong, and then another school, I believe it was DuQuoin, Illinois. But anyway, Oblong offered me the job, and I took the job, and I was there 29 years, and coaching there and coaching various points around. After I got done like 6 years at Oblong, I went to junior college ranks, and I coached 4 years at junior college at Lincoln Trail Junior College, and enjoyed that. And then they combined the position that my coaching position and AD. I was AD at that time, and combined that for the baseball coach. So basically, I was out of coaching for years, and I was happy, and I got to see my kids do a lot of things, and really content. And then all of a sudden, God knocks on the door again as a fellow coach, but now a principal at a neighboring school says, I like your style, and I know you're a disciplinarian, and we've been going through 2 seasons of 6 and 22, and we need some new life in our system, and I know you can bring it to this school. And I said, well, I've been out of coaching for a while. And he says, I know that, but I know you. So I took the job, and we finished that year. I think we won 14 games, but you would think after 6 and 22 season, you won the regional section or whatever. Yeah. But in the meantime, I was driving from my home in Robinson to Washington, Indiana, which is a 50-mile drive. And I was doing that in summers for summer driver education, and they were giving me a car and a credit card, and very good to me. And I was doing that over the summers. And then I met the basketball coach at Washington High School, and he didn't realize that I was coaching, and we kind of hit it off. And I was still coaching in this school in Illinois, and things went really well. And I had a camp set up with like 53 campers, and that's the best they'd ever had. And, but I walked down into the gym. He says, come on down to the gym. And I'd never been to the gym. I'd always been in the office and stuff in the car and driver ed. And I went down to the gym, and Sean, the Hatchet House is an arena, a high school arena. It's the second largest arena, high school basketball gymnasium, seats 7,000. And I walked in, and I looked up and saw that scoreboard, and I thought, this is amazing. I got a coach here. And so I went over and talked to the coach, and he said, would you be available, or would you want to coach here? And I said, absolutely.
Right.
So he gave me...
It's like, let me think about it for a minute. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But this guy, Dave Omer, was just so special to me, and offered me this position and as a head varsity assistant, and the pay was like twice as what I was making in Illinois. Yeah. But it was still a drive. And I said, Dave, I got to drive here 50 miles and 50 miles home. And he says, well, we'll structure our practices where the girls practice first, we'll practice later, and you can make all practices. So they really bent over backwards for me, and such a great guy. And we went through a lot together. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but we went through a lot together emotionally and with that team, but we were able to win a state championship in 2005 on last second shot by Luke Zeller. But I was there for 4 years, and then the last year that we won the state championship, Dave Omer decided he was going to retire, and he let everybody know that before. And so a new coach came in and asked me to stay another year for the transition period because he could bring in his own staff, which he did. So in 2006, I was done at Washington, still living in Robinson, Illinois, and won a state championship. And I'm thinking, that's as good as it gets. Well, I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like one more. I just need one more.
Right.
So, Lord and behold, the assistant job at Robinson High School opened up.
Okay.
And I put in my application and got the job, and we struggled a few years. And then 2010, we won another state championship in Illinois. So I coached until 2015, and then I retired from teaching and coaching. But, 2 state championships, one from Indiana, one from Illinois,
Right.
and then when I was teaching and coaching in junior college, we won the state championship in junior college and went on to Hutchinson, Kansas for the finals and lost there. But truly blessed and just met a lot of people that meant so much to me. And like you said, I've got memories all around me, and I look at them every day and think, boy, God has really blessed me.
That must have been quite a grind on you, going from Illinois to Indiana all the time. That had to wear on you. I mean, that took commitment.
Yeah.
To be able to get through that.
Yeah.
To do that. I mean, I can't. I feel like I drive just a little bit somewhere and I'm like, oh, this is an inconvenience. But when you're doing, I mean, it's amazing they shifted around and worked with you,
Yeah.
which says a lot about you and them that they were willing to do that for you.
Well, they needed somebody with experience, and I was the experience. And,
Yeah.
and you know, on the drive, you think about your practice plan and what you got to do. And then on your way home, you think about what didn't I do and what have I got to do tomorrow to make things better. So your mind is occupied. And
Right.
I would have to mention that I did get a couple speeding tickets going to practice. So
So what, clearly you had determined that you wanted to coach. And what really drove that decision? Was it just something that you were like in your mind, you're just like, this is what I want to do? Was there an individual that you just said, man, because of their investment, that's what I want to do? What gave you that push to really want to coach? Because it's a commitment.
it is.
And in all honesty, it's not really, for most high school, junior high coaches, it's not like you're getting rich doing it.
Right.
I mean, it's a sacrifice for those coaches. And I think a lot of times parents don't even get that those individuals, though they're getting something, it's not a great like stipend or whatever that they're getting to coach.
Right.
And it's not worth dealing with a lot of the junk. And we'll talk about that later. But what kind of drove you to do that?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it was just in my DNA. Like I said, I had a cousin that I admired, but the people I met along the way always encouraged me. And as I mentioned, Pete Love was just a great mentor to me and pushed me and saw worth in me, because at that time I didn't have a father.
Right.
So I was competitive in high school, and I just kept working and working and working. And when I got into coaching, I saw these kids that would develop and get better. And not only physically, but there was a side of them that you could work with them and make better people out of them. And I saw so much growth in kids that just propelled me to get stronger and stronger in the coaching field.
Yeah. Were there any, like, so when I think of players, and I always tell my kids this, there are some that just have that that it's not just athletic. There are athletic kids. I can think of a lot of people, won't use names, but in the pros, that they had a lot of talent. They were very gifted, and they started out very strong. But because they lacked work ethic as they got older, and when we say older in athletics, it's like 30 years old, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not like it's 50 years old,
Right.
but as they got older and there was a younger wave coming in, they were unable to compete because they didn't put the time in. But then there are those that have the talent and they have the work ethic and they continue. But then there's that group, and I call them kind of the Pete Roses, right? That don't really have tons of talent, but they work hard. And they're the guys that are diving across the floor and you're hearing that skin burning on the ground, and they will give anything for that team. And sometimes I would see players that I even went to school with, and I would be like, if you had a heart like that guy, nothing would stop you.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge when we're trying to form individuals and try to help them accomplish their dreams.
Right.
Because we have dreams, but we're also trying to help that younger generation. And we'll talk in a bit about opportunities to mold those players, because I think that's one of the coolest things that coaches have is that opportunity to invest. But when you were in the coaching, so I shared when we were prepping for this that I was a big Bobby Knight guy. And I just, man, his philosophy of basketball was just amazing, and how they just ran as a team. It was just like this well-oiled machine that was able to beat teams that were way better than them.
Hmm.
But because they were coached well, they were disciplined, and they just functioned really amazing. And I'm sure there were times when it wasn't very fun to play for him,
Hmm.
but he always got the most out of those players.
Exactly.
Who are the guys that you look to, whether pro coaches, college coaches, that you kind of look to as looking up to them, patterning after them? Who are those individuals?
Well, that'd have to be Bob Knight. Early in my coaching career, I was a Bob Knight disciple. I mean, I read all his books, videos, anything I could get a hold of that was Bob Knight, I did it. And I tried to indoctrinate all of his defensive philosophy into my programs, see ball, see man, ball,
Yep.
U-man, triangle, help and recover and all that stuff. And I was very fortunate that I got into camps at Indiana. And I had a friend that was on the staff there, and he got me into my first camp with Coach Knight. And needless to say, I was scared to death. I was a young coach,
Right.
intimidated, but just being around him and learning and picking up things from him and his staff and other camp coaches was so beneficial in my philosophy, developing my philosophy in coaching. So yeah, he was out there, and I worked his camps and got a true feeling of Indiana basketball, and so he would have to be one of the ones that I really looked up to. I had some high school coaches, John Kimball at Dunlap High School, that was one of the top basketball coaches in Illinois, and I got a lot of stuff from him, and so I still good friends with him today. Talk to him just about weekly, but he's just was such a great basketball mind in the state of Illinois. So I learned a lot from him. I mentioned Farmington. We had a coach there, Bill Wilson, and he was an excellent basketball coach, but he was an excellent person and dealt with kids and people really well. And I learned, that aspect from him. So Dave Omer at Washington was just a very mellow but a very great person. I mean, Christian person, hard worker, and gave responsibilities to me and had I grow from that. I just grew from that opportunity with him, and really respected him. And so I would say those were the people that really I looked up to and helped propel my future in basketball coaching.
Yeah, that's really great. I would always find myself defending Bobby Knight, and it was interesting because I couldn't defend throwing a chair across the court. There's just no defense of that. But what I think was undervalued with him is how he cared for his players after they were gone.
Right.
And the relationships that he had forged with those players. When you hear those stories, unfortunately, those crazy things that he did, whether hunting things or throwing a chair, they always overshadowed,
Amplified.
yeah,
Yes.
all the good things that he did. And maybe I'm just glad that he didn't live in the day of social media.
Yeah.
Because that might have been really bad.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
I can imagine he would have put his thoughts out there on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
But there was what I love is even watching like a Coach K come through, who was kind of that Bobby Knight guy who had a little better understanding of how to respond publicly and out with people. And you could see that influence there. But
Yeah.
it is interesting that in this day and age, that disciplinary coach, that strong, firm coach is kind of like, it's hard to be that person today.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody's a prima donna, but kids are told so much how great they are.
Mm-hmm.
That when somebody actually is honest with them, because the reality is a lot of people tell them great because they're hoping that if anything ever comes, that they'll benefit from that. But so many kids are skate through school because people are helping them out. They're getting them through those grades. They're getting them
Social
because
promotion. Yep.
exactly, and they just want to get them to college so they can say, "Hey, we put this person into college." And what we do is we just set these kids up for failure, and we need coaches who are willing to say, the path that you're on is not a good path.
Mm-hmm.
And you may get all the accolades, but here's where you can end up with that. I recently went to a funeral of our high school basketball coach, and when we were at the funeral and people were talking, they had said that he had never gotten a technical. I was like, what in the world? He never got a technical. That's amazing, because I would have probably had technicals all over the place. But what I loved about him, I remember one time there was a player, didn't have a lot. And it's probably because now it would be illegal, but he gave me some money. And he said, hey, take this guy out and get him some food. Dude, that guy downed like 5 Big Macs. But as I'm talking to him, he was sharing his story. And man, for a while, their house had a dirt floor. And in my community, I thought, really? Somebody has a dirt floor? But as I spent time with this guy, and he went on to play for a Division I college somewhere, maybe in Utah or something, but I was just so impressed that that coach was willing to do that. And just the camaraderie, even when he passed away, to see those guys come back and just seeing his accolades, not as what he accomplished on the court, not the league championships and things like that, but more who he was as a person.
Right.
And I think that is so important, that there are a lot of bad guys that accomplish a lot in basketball.
Right. Yeah.
But they step on a lot of people
Toes,
to get
yeah.
there. And the question is, how do we do that the right way, where we accomplish those accolades, but we also raise men that know how to respect other people, that aren't selfish and just all self-motivated. And I tell people often, the greatest battle we face is that battle between selfishness and selflessness, because it's real easy for us to be selfish. But you know that when you get that selfless player on the court that is thinking about everybody else. Again, I'm a hockey guy. I always told people Wayne Gretzky always had way more assists than goals, because he knew the benefit of passing. And when you see a good passer, I just watched a video on Larry Bird. I'm a Larry Bird guy, I know, and I loved that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, because I loved them both as a player.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, those boys could pass. And I think Larry Bird actually is undervalued with his passing.
Yeah, I do too.
Because as a Celtic fan, he would do these no-look passes that I was amazed at. With Magic Johnson, his full court spin pass, where he would throw a full court, spin it, and it would bounce right to the guy. I thought, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Nowadays, let's spread the court, put everybody outside the three-pointer, and go one-on-one.
Yeah.
I'll take a team any day over that.
Yeah.
But it's amazing because the culture in basketball has changed, and it's probably made it difficult for some coaches to keep going.
Yeah.
Because that style is so different. What would have been your challenges coaching in like today's world with the players now?
Well, I could never do it now. I mean, I've gone to area high schools, and the basketball has changed. You know, it's really changed. And I was more of a discipline coach, pattern coach, run this and run that. And now it's like you said, it's dribble, drive, and pitch, and shoot the three, and you know, penetrate and get fouled. It's a whole different game. You know, 5 spread, 4 in, or 4 out and 1 in, and it's just a different game now. And the individuals playing it are different. They're just different mindset.
And it's hard when you get so much money to play a game. And for some of these kids, they come from nothing.
Yeah.
And so we have to be fair to that all of a sudden they have this money, and if they don't have a wise person on their side, they get taken advantage of.
Yeah. And
it's such a challenge with that I don't know how a younger generation navigates all this, but man, I would not be able to coach in this day and age because it takes such a different mindset. Now here's one for you. When you go to basketball games, is it hard for you to just go and sit and watch a game, or do you find yourself always thinking, oh, do this or do this?
It's hard. I mean, I can watch it for a while, and then all of a sudden the coaching kicks in, and you're wondering why they're not playing this defense, or why they're not playing a zone, or why they're not defending well, and that kicks in. But the games that I've seen have been very frustrating to me. I mean, I watch a lot of college games on TV, talk to the TV a lot, but I've gone to area high schools, and it's just a game that's changed, and it's tough to fit in when you're a disciplined coach and you've spent all those years doing these certain types of things, and now it's more wide open play and up and down the court. And I saw a game this year. There's 27 turnovers, and I'm thinking,
wow.
27 turnovers, and the coach said the next day in the paper, yeah, we just only had 27 turnovers. I'm thinking, I had a goal board, and it was like, if you have 12 turnovers, then you didn't get an accolade. You didn't get a star for that. I mean, 12 turnovers, 16 turnovers are way too much, and he's talking about 27, and I'm going like, I could never do this.
That's like your kid comes home from a test. I got a D.
Yeah.
And he's happy because he passed.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're aiming a little higher on that.
Yeah.
So you talked about your wife and having grown up in a coach's family. My dad coached girls softball. He coached soccer. He coached basketball. And he was just always coaching something.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the value of my mom in that when he was off coaching, and sometimes I remember the story, I believe, is that the first time I went out of the house was to my dad's coaching a basketball game. He was coaching at that time an elementary school, and then he moved up to junior high, and then he coached soccer in high school. But she took me to a basketball game, and so it was kind of destined that I was going to be involved in basketball. Never happened. But my mom was so valuable to my dad as a support system.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes a coach can just dismiss it, take advantage of it, and fail to recognize the value of that woman behind him.
Yeah.
Kind of just share about, your wife's role in that, because 49 years of marriage.
Correct.
That doesn't happen for a coach if there's not a support and a togetherness in that.
Right. Well, again, I've been very blessed and very fortunate. My wife knew when we got married that I was going to be a coach and be coaching and go on a lot, but she has supported me, and I coached for 3 sports for 11 years.
Wow.
And so I was gone a lot. And a lot of times there were drives involved, so I didn't get home till real late. But she took care of everything around the house and with the kids, and we had 2 small kids at that time. And she would bring them to the games. I mean, many nights she would come into the gym with 2 little kids and make a late night drive home. And sometimes she'd drive by herself with the kids, and she'd follow me because we had 2 cars, and she was just so supportive and always propelled me to do better. And I guess, I didn't bring stuff home to her. I tried to keep the game away from her.
Right.
So I think that kind of helped too, but she was always a good listener if I wanted to vent a little bit, but she was always there for me.
Yeah.
And supported me. And actually, part of the coaching family, we were so associated with good people throughout the years that we were more or less a coaching family, and all the other coaches had small kids, and so that worked out real well. But it takes a special person to be a coach's wife, and I got one. I was, again, very blessed.
And one of the most difficult things I remember when it came to soccer, because that was in high school, how hard it was for my mom to sit up in the stands, because she had to hear every comment about my dad. Because I say opinions are like butts, everybody has them. But there are some people that are very good about not sharing their opinions. There are others that they're going to share their opinions and everybody else's.
No matter what, yeah.
And they're just going to put it right out there as if it's their right to do that. And I think that, like when you're coaching in a game, because I remember when you're playing or coaching, you don't even know a lot what's going on up there
Right.
because you're so focused on what you're
Right.
doing.
Right.
But your children, your spouse, they have to sit up and listen to that junk.
Yeah.
And I would always want to say to a parent, what if I came to your job
Mm-hmm.
and I berated you the entire time? How would you do your job? It would be pretty hard.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's like people don't recognize that. And the wife of a coach, in my opinion, not having been a wife of a coach, but I think that's one of the hardest aspects of it, is that I wouldn't even want to sit with the home crowd.
Right. Right.
I mean, were there any times that she came home and where she had heard things, or?
No, not really, because we were really fortunate because, again, we had coaches' wives that sit together, and they most often sit away
Okay.
from the fans. So I never heard anything from her, but you know, as well as I do, there's always that one vocal voice, that one person that you know that will yell certain things. I'm sure she heard it, but she never vented about it at home or anything like that. But I always worried about that. I worried about my wife hearing it, but about my kids.
Yeah.
You know, but we again, we're surrounded by good people and, and coaches'
that
wives.
Support system is great.
And we had some really, really loyal fans that knew, you know, things were not going to be perfect all the time, but they were there for us, and which I really appreciated. And yeah, I know sometimes it could have been really, really tough, but she did a heck of a job.
Yeah, that's amazing. So here's a kind of an odd question. Was there ever a favorite outfit that you wore when you coached, like for those big games?
I had, when I started coaching and was really into Bob Knight, I had the plaid sport.
Did you have his sport coat? So did my dad.
No, I had two.
Oh, you had two.
And I wore the blue shirt, and yeah, those were my favorites. But back in the days when I coached, you dressed up. I mean, at one time I had 17 suits in my closet.
Wow.
So you really dressed up. Nowadays they wear the pullovers like I have.
They're wearing sweatsuits
and
when they
wear
coach and
They
stuff.
wear tennis shoes. And,
yeah.
But that's one thing about Rick Pitino that
yes,
I like, because he dresses the part.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he is very classy, and that's what I wanted to personify, somebody with class.
Yeah.
And we always dressed up and enjoyed it, really enjoyed it, but it brought something to the program.
Too many coaches want to be one of the boys now.
Yeah.
And you can't. There's got to be a separation there, because you lose authority when you become one of the boys. And I'm not saying you have to be so distant that you don't have that relationship, but you have to have balance in that. My dad had one of those sport coats, and I was telling Les that one time I was asked to coach junior high basketball, and I really wasn't feeling it, but I looked at it more, at that time I was a youth pastor, so I looked at it more as an opportunity to get in the schools and to be able to impact kids. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay. And all of a sudden the school levy was up, and guys, it was amazing because the kids are trying out, and evidently some important individual was trying out for the team I was coaching. And someone showed up and they said, hey, listen, you've got to keep this guy on the team until after the levy passes. Well, we were just getting ready to make our first cuts, and I'm like, this guy is bad. I mean, he's like one of my worst guys, and if I keep him through first cuts, there's going to be some parents that are already mad at me, and I'm just starting out as a coach. So I did not know what to do, and I led him through the first one. There wasn't as much static as I thought there would be, and then the levy failed. And so I told Les that my coaching job was over before it even started. So I'm like 0-0. And but that was a really funny thing. But the thing is, my dad, like, they said, oh, do you want to wear that sport coat? I'm like, no way, never. But in the day, it was the hot thing to do.
It was a biggie, yeah.
Yeah, and today, just there has been kind of just everybody wants to be everybody's friends.
Right.
And those Dick Parcells, those Bobby Knight kind of guys have kind of gone to the wayside, and you
Yeah.
really don't see a lot of them. And now we're dealing with coaching changes all the time.
Right.
I mean, it is amazing how often people are come and go. And
Yeah.
with players now only being there sometimes 1 year and gone, I personally think it's horrible. I love that those sports that say, if you're going to go, you've got to stay 3 years. Let's if you're going to get scholarship money, and now with NIL, you've got to commit to 3 years. If not, go play the G League basketball or whatever.
Right.
But I think that the colleges are sinking all this money into players, and then they just go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even, this is off the subject, but I was watching a reality talent show, and there was an individual that could sing, and you were like, this person could win this.
Mm-hmm.
In the first audition, you were like, this person could win. Well, evidently, somebody contacted them. They signed with an agent, and they disappeared on the show. The next show's on, different show. Same thing. A guy comes, but he commits and he stays till the very end. And I remember the panel saying, thank you for sticking it out. And I think that's the thing, is that some people are looking for that next jump, and whether it's a job or whatever in sports, and they do it. And I'm not saying don't go get what you can get,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no loyalty.
Right.
And we see that throughout. It's all about the dollar now.
Exactly.
And I love the coach out at Gonzaga.
Mark Few.
He's had opportunities to go other places.
Exactly.
And he's like, why would I want to leave here?
Mm-hmm.
I think he said, like, I get to fish. I get to do all that
Yeah.
stuff. There's not the pressure on me like at other programs. He's content.
Right.
And that's a big part with coaching.
Exactly.
Because if you're not content, your players will know.
Yeah.
And parents will know.
Yeah, and people have offered him the big money, the big facilities, and all of that. And he said, I'm happy here. I'm a fly fisherman. I do what I want to do. There's not a great deal of media exposure there. He's been successful. He gets the players, and yeah, you got to respect him for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would be content way out there, but
Yeah.
it's what he likes to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember interviewing for a church up in Wisconsin, and they were like, the big things people do are hunt and fish. And I'm like, oh, I don't do either of those. And I'm like, how would I ever like give illustrations from the pulpit? They're going to be like, that's weird. We don't do that here. And I was like, yeah, there's just not a fit with him. There's a fit. And what I love is that he's content with where he's at. He enjoys investing in the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an amazing part of it. And so that's what I want to talk to you next about. And so he's a great springboard for that. Investing in your players. Because like I shared with the coach that I worked with that allowed me to take out that individual and provide food for him. I remember when Rick Majerus had a member of his team that their parent had died, if I'm getting that right. He took him up to his hotel to have pizza with him, and he got busted for it, for giving an improper benefit.
Mm-hmm.
That's just irritating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing what the NCAA draws rules on, and yet
Yeah.
what they choose to let go, there's no consistency.
Right.
And I guess that's one of the benefits of the changes that have happened, even though I think it's this free system that's going to just collapse and be crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, at least now you have some more freedom to be able to invest in your players and do some things with them that a guy like Rick Majerus couldn't even do.
Mm-hmm.
Or when that player has a family member die and you can't even help them get home.
Yeah.
That's just a crime
Right.
to not be able to do that.
Yeah.
What were some things just for you being able to invest in players that you enjoyed to do, and even some of the challenges of life situations that maybe those kids dealt with and how you navigated that with them?
Well, I have to think back. Probably one of the best coaching jobs I think I did, and I think my wife has mentioned this several times, is I went to this small school after being out of coaching for about 8 or 9 years, and they were 6 and 22, and I had a group of young men there that were not well disciplined. uncontrollable.
Mm-hmm.
They did their own thing. They had no structure whatsoever. And I had a challenge ahead of me. So being the person that I am and the programs that I've had, including, strong discipline and, doing this the right way. And I structured my program with them to make a difference. And I saw that group grow, and they, adhered to the structure and the discipline that I had and became very loyal and close to me. And you don't really think about that as you're coaching, but at the end of the year, they come up to you or 2 years later and go, Coach, thanks for doing this.
Right.
Remember when we were 14 and 12? I'm going, yeah. He says, that was one of the greatest seasons we had.
Yeah.
And they'd had, some pretty poor seasons, but just being able to do something to those individuals as individuals to bring their growth and development to where it was so special to me. I mean, we went through a lot, but I was stubborn enough to make sure they did it the way I wanted to do it because I knew I could be successful with it. So I think I changed a lot of people in a 1 year period with that team, and their growth was phenomenal. And, we had a pretty successful season according to their standards, but I had people come up to me and players and were so respectful to me afterwards and say, thanks for doing this for me, Coach. And, I was going through a hard time and you really picked me up. And it's things you don't really think about that you do, but it makes a difference in the world of an individual.
And I'm guessing that with your lack of a male role model early on, that you probably were very sensitive to those things then with other kids you're coaching kids that don't have role models,
right.
Some that have great role models.
Right. A lot of them, in this situation, and I'm glad you brought that up, in this situation, these kids were a lot of single parents, come from a lot of single parents, and there was just a lot of things going on in the community that I heard, and, they responded to structure and they responded to discipline, and they were successful, and I hope that I helped to make a difference in their life.
Yeah, it's one of the undervalued. I know some people that don't play sports kind of dismiss sports as it's really, there's not a lot of value. There's tons of value in sports outside of sports. That camaraderie, those relationships that are built, that teamwork of doing what is best for somebody else rather than yourself. There are so many lessons we learn that are valuable life lessons to where I wanted all my kids to play a sport because I want them to lose and learn how to lose.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, losing.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be satisfied with losing, but I want you to handle it well because I also want you to handle winning well. I tease, and we're going to do an episode on this at some point where we talk about this crud that I'm seeing online of these little kindergarten first graders talking trash to each other while they're playing basketball. And I mean, in league games for little kids, which travel and all that has gotten just so crazy at these young ages. But I watched a video where they were getting up in kids' faces, and I'm like, you just don't do that. You learn that because it's been modeled for you.
Right.
And that's a dangerous path that we're on right now because my dad always told me, he goes, handle it like Barry Sanders. Take that football and hand it to the ref and go do your job. Don't be patting yourself on the chest or, downplaying other people.
Right.
And that has grown so much.
Oh my goodness.
And that's why I wouldn't be able to coach.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, get your butt over on that bench because you're not getting up.
Yeah.
And I just watched a video with Bobby Knight, and they were asking him, how do you get a player in line? And he said, it's called the bench. And he says, and when I tell them to sit on the bench, they're going to remain on that bench.
Right.
And, today, transfer portal. That transfer portal, I agree with one time. Sometimes it just doesn't work. There's not a connection. But there are people that have transferred 3 times now.
I know.
And that's in 1 year period.
I know.
They have removed the coach's ability to discipline a player because once they don't like it, they just leave and go to another team.
Right.
So now what you're teaching these kids, if you don't like your job, quit and go somewhere else.
Go somewhere else.
Where I was always taught, keep going, keep doing it, and it'll make you stronger. And I think that people are undervaluing that decision to make the transfer portal wide. At least on the second time, make them sit out a year. There has to be a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
agree.
that's hindering coaches
Oh,
from
yeah.
investing in players.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch some of these teams, they're bringing in 3-4 transfers
I know.
in a year. And as a coach, I would be like, dude, stick with me. Because if you do, you're going to get out of here and you're going to be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And they have convinced themselves, or their parents have convinced themselves, that they are the best player and they're not being appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, work is tough.
Right.
Life is tough.
Yeah. Whatever happened to developing a freshman in college into a great player by their senior year?
Thank you. Yes.
I mean, I know I'm old and conservative, but that's the way I feel, and this portal stuff is to me it's ruining college basketball as well as the NIL stuff. I read the other day that some of these big colleges basketball programs are now putting together really strong financial packages to draw the best players in. Now that's going to be a mess.
It is.
It's going to be a mess down the road. So whoever has the most money is going to get the better players, and people like FAU or whatever, they're not going to have enough money to compete against a Kansas or whomever because they don't have the finances for that package for that special player.
NIL was not created to be a recruiting device. It was created to, if there was a good player, he could make some money off it. So if he ever got hurt or whatever happened, he had that money.
Yeah.
It wasn't for the 10th guy that sits on the bench to get paid $40,000 a year to come and play basketball. That's where you're getting a scholarship.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And these people that devalue a scholarship say, well, they could make money. Well, you know what? Then don't come to college.
Yeah.
Go find another path. Don't come to college for a year and then leave.
Right.
And I just think that we are set. I mean, how many people make it to the NBA from college? Not many.
Not many at all.
I mean, there are a lot that get drafted, but it's only like a couple rounds, the draft. It's not that long.
Yeah.
And most of them don't stick. And there have been some really good college players that did not last long. And if they were allowed to be invested in, I mean, every time I see a kid leave after his freshman or sophomore year, I'm like, dude, I know you can come back and go to college again, but are you really going to do that?
Yeah.
You're going to end up selling insurance. And I'm not devaluing selling insurance, but you're going to do something that you don't need a college degree for.
Right.
And that's a sad thing because we're robbing our kids because we've allowed them out of pressure or whatever to open up this portal, to open up this NIL with no guardrails or boundaries. And as a parent, I know as a parent, we want freedom for our kids, but we also want them to operate within a safe area. And that's why we put up boundaries and guardrails.
Sure.
And that's what NCAA has failed to do. The NCAA has failed to put up those boundaries and guardrails, and they've just said free for all.
Mm-hmm.
That never goes well for either the player or the schools.
Right.
And so that's a challenge that is faced now.
Yeah.
How did you deal with parents? Because I know that in my experience in sports, and I'll just use basketball, but it's in every sport, everybody thinks their kid is going to be the next LeBron James, the Kobe Bryant, the Michael Jordan, or Larry Bird. I'll throw him in there. But everybody thinks they're going to be that next guy. And the reality is it is such a small percent of individuals that are able to do that. And it's interesting when I think about the pressure, number one, that parents put on their kids. I mean, when I was playing, travel was just getting started. And you had one travel team. Now I see in baseball, there are kids that are playing every day on 3 different teams. And And I'm like, how in the world do you do that? Tournaments all the weekends.
Right.
I thought for a moment that AAU might take over high school basketball.
Yeah.
And people might stop playing high school because they could go and play AAU, or you've got the is it the IMG Academy down in Florida?
Right.
Where,
Yeah.
man, I mean, that's just like come and get trained for college or the
Yeah.
pros.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody could ever compete with that team
Yeah.
because they're loaded.
Right.
And how did you deal with parents? Because even though we can isolate them out, there are parents that have loud voices and it just comes through, or they're trying to get your ear after a game. I know I've had coaches that had a 24-hour rule that if you had a problem, you had to wait 24 hours and then they would talk to you about it. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
I never did that, but I thought that's a good idea. How did you deal with that?
Well, I did that. Basically, I would tell parents, cool off, and we'll talk about it. Come in and meet me tomorrow after school, 3:30, and we'll sit down and talk about it. So that's the way I approached it. A lot of times in hearing stuff, I would go in one ear and out the other and just let it go. Sometimes it remained, and I kind of dwelled on it, but you get through it. And I always tried to, gain my composure and senses and not be emotional and dealing with parents. And I always tried to put everything out there at my parents' meeting. This is what I was going to do and how I was going to handle it. And if you disagree with it, come and see me. But I tried to put everything. I was a rules guy. I had rules for everything, and we went over those before the season started. And they would have questions. Why do you want to do this, and why do you want to do that? And I always had my reasons. But I think you have to keep them informed up front, and that cut down on a lot of questions and irritation by the parents. But I see it getting worse now with parents because, like you said, everybody thinks their kid is going to be a star. Mm-hmm. And if they don't get the right playing time or the right exposure, or their name is not in the paper, then it just boils with parents, and they have to vent some way, and it's usually at the coach.
And that parent is only getting one side of the narrative.
Right.
When their kid comes home, their kid's saying, "Oh, the coach is so bad. He treats me this way." Well, they're not going home and saying, "Well, I'm lazy at practice. I argue with the coach," and things like that. And so the parent comes in. I always told my kids that I was going to believe 50% of what they said, that when they came, because I understood that they were going to tell me a story that we always tell a story that benefits us, that makes us look good in that story. That's not always the reality. And when we see that, it's so important for us to understand as parents even that we need to support those coaches. I think what makes it hard for a parent is when the coach gives in to the vocal minority
mm-hmm.
and plays their son
mm-hmm.
or plays their daughter.
Yeah.
And as a parent, that ticks you off.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, so I have to be loud to get my son playing time or my daughter playing time? Because unfortunately in our world, that's what we see a lot of.
Yeah.
The squeaky wheel gets the attention.
Yeah.
And me, when I was doing coaching, and basically when my kids were young, the squeaky wheel, I shut it off and I didn't even listen to it. And matter of fact, I was going to prove you a point and they were going to play less.
Yeah.
And it was the parents that supported. And I remember one time we had a girl that was on the other team. It was baseball, and it was a coach pitch. And man, she hit the ball and it hit her leg. She was out, and and the coach was like, "Okay, you're out." I'm like, "No, run to first." Because the girl had never been on base before, and I'd heard somebody talking about it, and I let her run to first, and we all celebrated that she got her first hit ever. We lost the game by 1 run. She had come around and scored, and we lost by 1 run. So after the game, I'm thinking, I'm dead.
Yeah.
These parents are going to be so angry at me because we had a really good team. That was one of our only losses. And it was awesome. They were so supportive. They're like, "We know what you did.
Yeah.
We saw it."
Yeah.
As parents, we can be so encouraging to coaches, and there's great value in that. we don't want to make it a burden for them to do their job, but we want to encourage them. And we know that
Right.
when you coach, those parents are so valuable.
Yeah.
And but it's a challenge. I told people I was a better coach than a parent in the stands, because when you're a coach, it's hard to sit in the stands
Yeah.
and not coach.
Right.
And so I learned to take photographs because taking pictures, then I could just like not worry about it, because I was always thinking strategy and
Yeah.
things like that. So it was a challenge. Now, so your son played for a different school than you coached at.
Right.
Were you able to get to his games?
Yeah, I got to some of his games. Yeah.
Yeah, because that would have been really a challenge.
Right.
And then, so your daughter was then a cheerleader
My
at the
daughter was
school?
a cheerleader, and she was at the middle school, and my
Okay.
son was in high school, and so my wife was going all directions and then supporting me and going to my games on Tuesdays and Fridays, and so it was a very, very busy time.
So she's balancing basically three things.
She is
trying to, yeah, wow.
yeah. And she had a full-time job, and
Wow.
yeah,
It's kind of like that when Thanksgiving dinner comes together. You're like, how did all these things come together at the same time?
Yeah.
That's like a miracle,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, everything's
It's like,
hot and on the table at the same time.
yeah, was that a miracle that just
Yeah.
took place?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, trying
Yeah.
to balance all of the busyness. For
Yeah.
us, we were blessed. Both of our boys played on the same team a lot. We loved when they played on the same hockey team because it was one game
Yeah.
and one place we had to go to. When we think about just the reward of being a coach, we can focus on some of the bad things, but what did you find most rewarding about coaching?
It's about changing lives. And I'll give you an example. Small school, big school. I was coaching at the small schools. Both were in the same county. I had a player that transferred from the big school to my school, which is very, very controversial, having to live in the district and all this and that. We went through all of that, but a very good basketball player. He transfers into our school, and we're very fortunate, and we get to the regional championship versus the big school that he came from. Well, 2 nights before the regional championship, and we're very fortunate to get there, but 2 nights before the regional championship, he, being my best player, was caught drinking
Oh, wow.
while in a car. And so we got word of that, and I suspended him. Well, people from my district, from my school, wanted to hang me. I mean, you threw the game, coach. We could have beaten the big school,
Right.
the rivalry of the county. We could have won that because he was averaging like 26 points a game. But I sucked it up and I suspended him. And I mean, I was out on warm up and I heard voices from the crowd.
Yeah.
He's not starting. He's not there. Where is he? What happened? And then afterwards, you threw the game. You threw the game. So this individual, a few years later, came up to me and he said, Coach, he says, I agree with what you did. He says, you changed my life.
Wow.
He says, I have and had a drinking problem. And he said, I've suffered from that drinking problem, but you caught it in time and helped me through it. So I know you took a lot of flack for that, but he says, I really appreciate it. So that's the things, that in my mind that I helped to change somebody's life for the good.
That's amazing. At first, I thought you were going to tell me his name was Jimmy and you coached at Hickory. For you that don't know, that's Hoosiers, the movie.
That's a good one.
I was like, was he at Hickory? Man, did Gene Hackman play him?
I have been to Hickory.
And that's the thing, is that having coached in Illinois and Indiana basketball is like life.
Oh, man.
I mean, it is just people that haven't lived there don't get what it's like there. I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's still that same, but man, in my days of growing up, that was the place, Indiana basketball.
Yeah, Hoosier hysteria.
Yeah. I mean, it just amazing. When I think about your coaching career and then it comes time to step away, that's a difficult thing to do sometimes when you've been doing it so long. How did that transition work for you? How did that go?
Well, it was tough. It was difficult, but I knew that you start losing some of your your hearing or whatever, and your faculties, and I just knew it was time to step away. And I was going to retire from teaching, and I thought this would be just a great time just to call it all quits. I've been so fortunate. I've been through 3 state championships, and I met all kinds of people,
Yeah.
and I just thought, well, it's time. It's time, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. That's like a perfect, because anybody that has watched the Time to Man Up podcast knows that that's what I always say. It's time. It's time to man up. And Les, I want to thank you for being part of this aspect of Time to Man Up with the table talk. I have to get one last thing in because this room's pretty sweet that Les has with all of his memorabilia and that. But behind him, and you probably can't see it in the video, and if you're listening on audio, you definitely can't see it, but there's a record hanging on his wall, and it caught my attention. So let's just tell the people what that record is.
Well, in the mid-'60s, we had a garage band in my hometown, and we were called the Londons. And we played back then they had teen towns all around, and we played a lot of teen towns and street dances and performances at certain areas. And we were pretty good, and we had the opportunity to cut a record. And my good friend, lead guitarist Louis Ratcliffe, wrote this song, and we were fortunate to go to St. Louis and cut this record, and it's just a great experience. And we didn't sell a lot of them, but it was a great experience. And I tell people, well, it went all copper. So it was not that successful, but we were hometown pride, garage band, rock and roll band, and we played all the 60s and music in the early 70s, and just enjoyed it. And since then I still keep in touch with a couple of the band members, but a couple have deceased, but it was just a great experience, and really enjoyed it.
So in all your years, what is the greatest record you have?
Well, I want to tell you I want to tell you this for your viewers. It is on YouTube.
Really?
I'm with the Beatles and everybody else. It is on YouTube. It's called "I Love You So," and it's by the Londons. LUNDONS.
Oh my goodness! Go check that out.
Go check it out, and it sounds a little Beach Boyish,
man.
But it is on YouTube.
So were you like Phil Collins singing from the drums, or?
No, I just harmonize once in a while. I don't have a very good voice, but I was a drummer, and we had a 6-piece band. And
so what I'm guessing is this: that's a cool record, but probably nothing better than the state championships.
That's right. That's right.
Those are pretty amazing moments. He's got a picture, you can't see it, but of one of those moments. And those are memories that you always have. And even looking back, I find that the further I get away from my memories, the greater they become.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's just a really cool thing. So Les, thanks again for joining us on Table Talk. And guys, thank you for being with us for this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, get the word out there as we try to spread the word about Time to Man Up and the Table Talk segment, as we spend time with individuals finding out just their life stories. I think it's just always encouraging to hear people's life stories, because we learn so many lessons from the difficult times and from the good times. And a lot of times we can identify with those things in our own lives. So make sure to check us out, and you can go to www.timetommanup.com and see more information, and also find out where we are available on YouTube, Spotify, and some other platforms. Guys, have a great day, and again, we hope you've enjoyed this episode.